Hello. Hello, this is the My Artifact episode number 3651. Today's date is October 19, 2025. It's been almost like uh, a night at 9:54 p.m. All right, let's just jump into the question. Should we? Let's go. All right, question is, what if Black Death wipe out less of Europe? Oh, that is a really good question. That's a really good question. Okay, first of all, what exactly is this question and why am I asking this question to myself? Okay, this is what if question. Okay, yeah, why am I asking this question? I don't know. What if question is always really interested way to give the answer. It kind of like force you to think about that particular scenario, create that particular reality, and kind of like assembly try to tell regarding about how much knowledge that I have. It's I don't know how do I supposed to explain this. It kind of like force me to think about that particular reality and stuff like that. And sometimes I just feel like that ki I'm feel like that ki I'm kind of like way much smarter and things like that. I don't know why, but it's just like that na ki, like from since couple of kind of like days I was kind of like asking this what if questions, and I'm kind of like giving such an answer that I don't even knew that ki these are kind of like an answer that I knew. Like I knew that, but it's just like that na ki the way that I explain, the way that things are actually connected with each other, na, I don't know. Like basically I went into that particular zone that when I was trying to talk about those particular stuff, and then I was kind of like a proud myself that ki, oh my god, I have this information inside of my head and I didn't really knew that. This is what exactly happened. I don't know, like basically this is if you are kind of like listening this thing, just try it. Okay, it's gonna definitely add value, something like that. It's kind of like somebody is this thing, there is a kind of like some sort of memories inside of your head that you are not using it. Those what if questions are kind of like let you to kind of like add little bit of spark in that particular knowledge that you already get in your lifetime, in your kind of like some past history, and it kind of like somebody illuminate that particular memories inside your head. Probably, I'm not really sure about that, but it kind of like a work for me. It kind of like something that I feel really good while kind of like asking these what if questions. Okay, disclaimer. Okay, disclaimer is very much essential. Okay, yeah, because of I'm kind of like somebody telling this information, so it's not exactly right or it's not exactly wrong either. It is just my opinion. Okay, yeah. So basically, is this thing, if you are kind of like seeking this information, don't take this information very seriously. Go to the internet, search over there, and you will gonna get very right information. Do not believe in this thing. I'm just kind of like giving my opinion. That means my opinion might be right, might be wrong, might be right too. I'm just giving my opinion. All right, all right. Let's go. Let's continue this question. Okay, the question is, what if Black Death was wipe out less of the Europe? Okay, first of all, there is a couple of things that you have to understand first. What is exactly Black Death? Okay, yeah. Okay, I'm kind of like a simplified, very simple way. Okay, yeah. In 2020, not that much early, like basically almost like a 5 year ago, like today's date is a 2025. Okay, 5 year ago means 2020. There is a COVID virus is kind of like a spread all across the planet. Okay, yeah. That COVID virus is actually originated from China, and it kind of like a spread into all around the world. Italy, Europe, US, India, everywhere. Okay. By the way, COVID virus is not really that much deadly. Okay, yeah, it's not really that much deadly. It's a kind of like a very just common virus, but the way that it spread, it's very rapidly. Okay, because this COVID virus is kind of like a spread, like basically even if you are contact with the air, you just gonna get that thing. Like basically the way that it spread so rapidly, so that's why it kind of like a spread all across the planet. Okay, yeah. As I mentioned, the COVID virus is not really that much deadly, but still there are almost like maybe probably in all around the world, maybe kind of like millions of people die. Okay, regarding about millions of people die, but still millions of people are really too much. Okay, yeah, but still what I'm trying to tell you is this thing, the millions of people are die as kind of like a very less number as compared to kind of like some historical kind of like a pandemic that people die. Yeah, like literally just like that na ki this COVID virus is kind of like a spread all across the planet. Okay, yeah, but still kind of like it takes kind of like only millions of people die. Okay, yeah. Why am I say only millions of people die? Like, have you ever count on millions of people? Like, millions of people are like really. But dude, okay, I'm talking about like there are a lot of kind of like a factor are kind of like a involve everything. Okay, yeah. Basically, is this thing na ki COVID virus is not the kind of like COVID virus you just infected and you just die. No, it's not really that. Like if you are a healthy person, then COVID virus is not really affecting for you. Like basically, I'm very healthy person. I also had a COVID. Okay, yeah. But it just impacted me for almost like a couple of days. Okay, I was kind of like a bitly sick for maybe 1 or 2 days, and then after that, I'm fully recovered. But I am kind of like somebody doing. I was kind of like in the quarantine for almost like a 3 weeks, 3-4 weeks, and I was never really talk with. I never really kind of like any have any contact with anyone at all. Like basically, like I was kind of like somebody. I was kind of like somebody have another room, and my father and everyone are kind of like giving me like they don't really touch me anything at all. Okay, so because of we are kind of like suddenly put all those kind of like a primary measures to kind of like stop this virus, so that's why very less people actually die. Okay, yeah. Yeah, millions of people are really too much, but as compared to kind of like a world population, yes, very less people actually die is because of the COVID virus. Okay, yeah. What I'm trying to tell you, what exactly is this thing that key sometimes those pandemics are kind of like a very much danger. Okay, yeah. Right now in COVID-19 it actually happened in 2020, which actually happened in modern world. And in the modern world, we have kind of like invented a lot of medicine. We have kind of like a lot of vaccination drives and things and that, and we actually took control everything. Okay, so within a year, we actually kind of like within a 1 or 2 year, we actually control everything regarding about pandemic and stuff like that. Okay, yeah, right now in 2025, COVID virus is kind of like something completely gone. Like not completely gone, there is might be some sort of cases are actually available, it's not like that, but still we are literally cure about this thing. Okay, it's not considered as a kind of pandemic and things like that. But in history there are kind of like a lot of kind of like a some event is actually happened where entire population are died, entire population of the died, and Black Death is one of those. Okay, yeah. Now what is actually Black Death? Okay, yeah. So Black Death is an event. Okay, it's not a kind of like somebody is saying that a disease. It's an event where kind of like a millions of die. Okay, let me tell you one thing. Almost like a 70% of the population of the Europe, 60 to 70% of the population are eliminated is because of this Black Death. Okay, yeah, Black Death. By the way, Black Death is a kind of like a something. A plague is actually spread. Okay, all around the Europe. Okay. By the way, also, this Black Death means this plague is not just kind of like infected only in Europe. No, it actually infected in rest of the world too. It actually kind of like infected Southern Asia, like a Middle East, Europe, North Africa. Yeah, they are actually more infected too. But the problem is that at that time means like that when this Black Death happened actually happened in mid 13th centuries, like basically 1340 something, 1314 to 1315. I'm not really sure, but yeah, in mid between this kind of like Black Death happened. Okay, yeah. So what is actually is this thing? Okay, yeah. Why we kind of like always associate Black Death with Europe? Because of that, Europe has a kind of like a entire written records regarding about this is actually happened. Okay, yeah. Because let me tell you one thing. This Black Death is actually happened in the Middle East, Asia or Southern Asia or China, and people actually die, but at that time people are not actually kind of like doing any kind of like records. Okay, because also let me tell you one thing, at that time people are died. Okay, and it's very common thing, legitimately very common thing. Okay, yeah, like basically this thing in today's world, someone gonna die, people are kind of like somebody wants to know why this person die and things and that and that and that. Okay, yeah, but I'm talking about like a 13th century, and at that time people just die. Like basically the value of the people is almost negligible. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing na ki in rest of the world doesn't really have any kind of like somebody have any kind of like a priority that ki this is kind of like somebody virus is actually infected all around the people and they are kind of like people are die and things like that. people don't really care at all. People just die and die. Okay, yeah. It's just like, yeah. But then why this kind of like Europe is kind of like a mainly focus on Black Death is because of that Europe has already have written records regarding about this thing. Like basically this thing at that time people are also dying in Europe too. Okay, yeah. in abundant quality, yeah, abundant quantity. But what I'm trying to tell you is this thing ki people are die, like basically this is the first time that European civilization are kind of like realize that people actually die is because of some sort of disease. And that is kind of like really new to them, that they don't really know what exactly is this thing. They don't know why those so many people actually die. So that's why they kind of like put the records regarding about that almost like a 70% of the population of the Europe are actually dies because of this plague disease and things like that. And it was very devastating situation. Very, very, very devastating situation. So what is exactly is this plague? Like, is this kind of like a plague is like a very dangerous? No, it's not danger that. Okay, yeah. Like as compared to kind of like it is dangerous. Yeah, it is kind of like a little bit of like it's not. What I'm trying to tell you is this thing, why so many people actually die is because of the less availability of kind of like a medicine or kind of like some medical services. Because at that time we have a kind of like a lot of doctors and hospitals and things like that. Even if our kind of like something wrong happened, we went to the hospital and kind of like figure it out and kind of solve the problems. In 13th century, these are not exist. Okay, yeah, like doctors are exist. It's not really that doctors are not exist, but these are kind of like only available for only elite people. Okay, yeah, and like basically the services of medicine services that we are exist today is not actually available at that time. So, and also regarding about hygiene too, na. Like basically most of the thing is that those are viruses actually kind of like a spread through lot of kind of like some unhygiene, like rats and things, like a lot of animals and stuff like that. We are actually very much take care about hygiene today. Okay, we kind of like a bath every day, we brush our teeth every day. Okay, we make sure we eat food properly and things like that. But 13th century people are kind of like surviving. Okay, like they are not really taking care of that. I'm gonna make sure that actually supposed to be kind of like hygiene things like that. Only elite people can kind of like something like that afford that kind of like a luxury life. But almost like a 98% of the population are just living in kind of like something very hellhole. So that's why like there are multiple factors are responsible for kind of like this plague virus actually spreads so rapidly, and probably almost like 70% of the population actually dies. 70-60% of the population of the Europe population actually dies because of this disease. Like a very heavy, like this is kind of like basically this, you might not knew about this disease, but there is a kind of like a particular object that associate with that thing. Okay, and might be you actually seen that thing. Have you ever seen there is a kind of like a person who is kind of like wearing a mask? Like a mask is a very weird mask. Okay, yeah. In that particular mask has a kind of like a choch, a kind of like a bird stuff. I don't know what exactly. Like basically in Marathi we call it as a choch. Okay, yeah. Like pakshachi choch. Okay, yeah. I'm not really sure what exactly the bird, like about the bird mouth, probably bird mouth mask. You just kind of like search it on the Google, and probably when you see that thing you realize that, oh, I seen that stuff. Okay, yeah. So this is called as a kind of like a mask at that time. Okay, and those masks are actually weared by kind of like only people who are kind of like only nurses or doctor, because at that time there is no doctor, there is no nurses, but people who are kind of like somebody in this particular profession that they want to know and stuff like that. Specifically these are kind of like somebody just church and things like that. These are mostly for like a fathers, okay, like a religious person. Okay, yeah. So this is kind of like a mask, like it's kind of like protected from them from this Black Death and things like that. And it is fully covered by the, like basically all the kind of like organs are fully covered by this kind of like some entire costume and stuff like that, which is like a really good, really amazing. Okay, and you actually seen it in your life. It's not really that you haven't really seen it. If you don't really know, just search about that key, like a bird mouth mask, Black Death. Search about anything, you will gonna found that particular costume and you will gonna recognize that, oh, I seen that stuff in somewhere. Okay, yeah. So this is called Black Death. Okay, yeah. Now let me tell you one thing regarding about this Black Death, how this actually happened. Okay, yeah. I'm not really sure regarding about the information where it came from. Okay, yeah. I also kind of like watched a couple of documentaries in the YouTube platform, and I just knew it a little bit. I'm not really sure about that. One thing for sure is that there is a kind of like assembly. The ship is actually came from Asia from the trade route to kind of like assembly came into the kind of like some sort of port in Europe. Okay, yeah. That ship, almost like every people actually die in that particular ship. Like what is actually happened? Okay, yeah. This is like this is the ship is actually came to the port. Okay, yeah. And in this particular ship, every people die. Every people, like legitimately, this is the ship is kind of like something that so many people die so many days ago. So basically, this is just a kind of like something just a dead body ship. It arrive and kind of like it arrive at kind of like somebody a particular coast, it particular kind of like a port. Okay, yeah. The people who are at the port, they are kind of like a bit really curious about that key. Like no one is actually came out. Like basically they were kind of like wondered that key how does those people actually dead. Okay, yeah. But as I mentioned, at that time people actually die. Okay, and it's not really that kind of like something it's very common to them. Okay, yeah. So they don't really kind of like something very much focus on that. They just kind of like a thing that key, oh, people just die, forget. Okay, yeah. So they just kind of like only that key, like basically is this thing that key, they just kind of like remove the dead body and they are kind of like utilizing this ship kind of like again. Okay, yeah. But by the way, this ship is carrying that particular viruses, that plague viruses. And because of this kind of like a ship is actually carrying that plague viruses, it kind of like something spread across that particular port area. Okay, and people are kind of like infected by plagues. Suddenly people are kind of like somebody coughing and things and that, and suddenly some of the people actually die. Okay, and they don't know the reason and stuff like that. As I mentioned, at that time people actually die is very common. So at the beginning people don't really care about that. It's just kind of like somebody another day at office. That's it. Okay, yeah. So yeah, this is kind of like very much common. Then suddenly so many people actually die in Europe, like so many people, like suddenly like the whoever in contact, like I don't know, but some people are kind of like dies because of no reason. And this is what actually happened. Now people are kind of like very much scary regarding about how this thing actually happened, and people are dying, and like so many people actually dying, and it was like a really fucked up situation at that time. Okay, yeah. Now some of the people are kind of like somebody, like basically is this thing, this is what I'm trying to tell you. It's not just happened in just kind of like somebody couple of days. It happened couple of years, like probably within maybe 1 year, 1 or 2 year, this virus actually spread entire continent. Like it actually spread entire Europe. Okay, yeah. And because of these things, 70% of the population actually died. Now the question is that, okay, yeah, if the 70% people are die, why not 30% does not die? What kind of like somebody they did something that they didn't really died. Okay, yeah. Now 70% die, that means 30% will gonna survive. Okay, yeah. So what does those 30% did something differently? Those 30% of the people did something very differently. They didn't really kind of like went into the hospital and kind of no, nothing at all. At that time there is no hospital, there is no doctor. Okay, yeah. So what does they do? They are kind of like somebody realize that there are so many people actually die is because of something. Okay, and they kind of like realize that there is a one person actually got the disease and another person got the disease too. Okay, yeah. So what does they do? They are kind of like started doing isolation. Like basically almost like an entire village are kind of like became isolated. Like legitimately is this thing, they are kind of like make sure that their village no one will gonna cross. They are kind of like make the fortification regarding about the entire village that no one should supposed to cross this village and things like that, so that the people in the village will be protected from this virus and things like that. And they will gonna make sure that no one will gonna cross, not even the kind of like somebody, any kind of like somebody animal should supposed to be cross the village and things like that. So they are gonna make sure everything so that people should supposed to survive. So because of the isolation and because of the quarantine, people are kind of like somebody survive. So the 30% are survive is because of this reason, because of they are kind of like kept themselves in the isolation so that they should supposed to be survive. Okay, yeah. And rest of people actually just die. All right. So this is like a very this Black Death stuff happened was like really fucked up thing, dude. Just like really stuff. Okay, yeah. Now regarding about the question, okay, I did talk about the question. Okay, the question is that, what if Black Death wipe out less in the Europe? Okay, yeah. Now I'm gonna talk about the question. The question says that, what if because of the Black Death, very less people actually die? Then what would be the reality? What would be like? What if very less people actually die? Then what would be that? Okay, yes, Black Death is very devastating, and millions of people, more than millions of people actually die. That is true. Okay, yeah, that is true. But something that na ki in our human history, something happened wrong. It meant for right reason. It meant for right reason. Like basically, I have so many evidence that kind of like somebody just lead us to kind of like some really right way. Like basically, this thing, World War II happened, millions of people actually die. But after that thing, people realize that ki war is not meant to be right thing. So that after the World War, there is no big war is actually happened. And I'm sure that in the future, there is no kind of like such a war will gonna establish in the future too, because world already knew that what can war can do. Okay, yeah. As also is this thing, we build such a weapon, such a powerful weapon that kind of like destroy the rest of the planet. Not only the like a world, but entire planet. So basically is this thing, we understand as a human kind of like assembly, like basically is this thing na, it's also happened in your personal life too. Like basically this is something actually fucked up that happened. And you kind of like learn from it na. Like basically I make a lot of mistakes in my life, and kind of like I learn from that. Probably what I'm trying to tell you is this thing, something bad happened is for the right reason, and we just have to find that right reason. Or maybe it's kind of like something bad happened, it kind of like forced you to think about something differently, that how do we supposed to recover and things like that. And I think that na ki Black Death is one of that reason that kind of like lead people to do something very differently. Now, what is actually differently? What is actually existing item? Like what kind of like assembly Black Death kind of like add value to the people? So much. Let me tell you one thing. At that time, okay, yeah, Europe was kind of like assembly, like this is actually time about the kind of like a 13th century. Okay, yeah, mid 13th century. Okay, yeah. And there are a lot of kind of like assembly empire is actually kind of like a ruling the Europe. Okay, yeah, Britain Empire, then a kind of like assembly the Spanish Empire, Portugal Empire, France Empire. Okay, there are multiple empire are kind of like a ruling the kind of like a entire continent. Okay, now another thing is that ki most of people are kind of like somebody doing a job as agriculture. Okay, I'm talking about 13th century, and people are kind of like doing the job as a kind of like somebody agriculture and things like that. Okay, yeah. Now in the agriculture, okay, if they wanted to kind of like somebody produce kind of like somebody high fertile things and that, they need to put lot of effort. Let me tell you one thing, in the farming, you need so many people, so that you would kind of like make a lot of foods and stuff like that. Okay, yeah, because like in the farming, it's not gonna happen by 1 or 2 person. No, you need kind of like so many people are kind of like came together and kind of like do the things. By the way, most of people are not really agree with this thing today, because of that today's we are actually using a lot of technology. We have tractor, we have this, we have kind of like use all this kind of like assembly advanced tools to kind of like make the farming so easily. But I'm talking about 13th century, and at that time there is no kind of like assembly any kind of like assembly any kind of like assembly tool or something like that. Everything should supposed to be happen by human effort and stuff like that. Now because of the Black Death, almost like a entire 60-70% population actually wipe out. Okay, yeah. And in this particular 70-80% of the population, those people are kind of like a worker or farmers. They are actually die. Okay, yeah, because like obviously they are kind of like simply living in kind of like a unhygiene kind of like a society and things like that. So basically they die. Okay, only the rich people are kind of like some will survive. Means like that ki people who kind of like isolate themselves, those people survive, and only the rich people who are have a kind of like a big castle and things like that, those people are only survive. Okay, and rest of the kind of like people who are farmer, worker, everyone actually die. Now what is actually happened after that? Now because of this thing, almost like a 70% of the population die. There is no one left for kind of like a doing the farming. Like no one is actually left. Like basically is this thing now, let's just say that I run the farm. I have almost like let's just say I have almost like 100 acres of farm. Okay, yeah. In the 100 acres of farm, I have almost like maybe 500 people who are kind of like working in my farm. Okay, and now I am the rich person. Now because of this Black Death happened, almost like my entire worker actually die. Almost like a 500 out of maybe 10-20 people actually survive and rest of people actually die. Now how do I supposed to do this farming? Like basically I have only 20 people. How do I supposed to kind of like only produce the kind of like only fertile and stuff like that? It's not really possible for me because I have so much amount of land, and probably I cannot kind of like produce that much kind of like assembly the grains and stuff like that. It's not really possible for me. So because of this thing, I am broke. Okay, and I can't really meet my kind of like assembly the all the things and kind of like assembly. Because of this thing, I am not really getting that much property. So what is actually happened that I sold my land to the kind of like all the 20 people who are kind of like assembly alive. I kind of like sold them that take my land. Okay, yeah, and you just have to do it by yourself. Okay, because I can't afford you. I can't kind of like give you any kind of like food or money or things like that, because obviously I'm putting a lot of losses. Because of that, there are so many people actually die. Okay, yeah. So this is just a kind of like a story of one farmer, but it actually happened to the so many people in the end, and not just kind of like some farmer, every worker and things like that. Same thing happened. So because of this thing happened, there is kind of like very less people actually exist in the Europe. After this Black Death, very less people actually exist. Now this less people actually exist. Then how do we supposed to do that? We have to do a farming. We have to do this thing. So because of this thing, it kind of like assembly forced them to kind of like try to invent things, like basically a tractor or any kind of like assembly industrial mechanism or things like that, so that we don't really require any kind of like a people. Like basically we should supposed to build such a kind of like assembly things, or kind of like assembly invent some sort of stuff that eliminate those people, and kind of like assembly we should supposed to be do the things by kind of like all those mechanism and stuff like that. So because of this kind of like assembly Black Death, and because of almost like a 70-80% of the population should die, it kind of like a people who are kind of like left or survive, they are kind of like a force. They are kind of like they are kind of like assembly. It's become kind of like assembly really essential for them. It's kind of like assembly very necessity for them to kind of like invent some sort of stuff that doesn't really require a human intervention. And because of this thing, because of the Black Death happened, the Renaissance era is actually established. Okay, yeah. The Renaissance era is actually called as, in this Renaissance era, means like that in the 15th century in the Europe, this kind of like a Renaissance era is kind of like assembly getting lot of kind of like assembly invention, innovation actually happened. Painting, architecture, kind of like assembly, a lot of stuff is actually invented over that. And those Renaissance era is kind of like a lead to the Industrial Revolution. And those Industrial Revolution leads to the modern world and leads to us today. Right? So this is what kind of like assembly Black Death are responsible for. Let me tell you one thing. Every part of the history, every kind of like assembly blood kind of like assembly mentioned in the history, it leads to something really right way. Yes, Black Death happened. Yes, millions of people actually die because of the Black Death. But it kind of like leads to kind of like something such a world where kind of like assembly we are making a world much more better place. And this is what it is. Okay, yeah. Now regarding about the question says that what if less people actually die because of the Black Death? Then what will actually happen? That less people die means like that let's just say I run the farm, I have 100 acres of farm, and I have almost like 500 people are actually working my farm. Less people means like that 500 out of maybe 10, 20, or let's just say 50 people die. Still I have 450 people. Still I have 450 people, which is kind of like a had enough for me to kind of like assembly survive myself, or as well as kind of like assembly make sure that my land and my farm should supposed to be, yeah. So because of I don't really require a necessity, so that I would kind of like assembly invent stuff. Why do I need that? Like basically I have people who are kind of like doing the same thing. So why would I supposed to kind of like put the effort and kind of like a need is one of the really essential for innovation. If I don't really have a need, why do I supposed to innovate? So if the less people actually die in Black Death, that means I am not gonna need any kind of innovation. So if I not need any kind of innovation, then we are not kind of living this world right now. Okay, yeah, we might still kind of maybe like a 500 year the like basically is this thing when if the Black Death is actually less people actually die, then probably Renaissance would happen very less. The Industrial Revolution happened even more time probably is this thing. So yeah, it's kind of like a delayed is actually happening everywhere. Like it's not that key, it's not gonna happen. Like basically, yes, Renaissance should supposed to be happen. The Industrial Revolution should supposed to be happen, but they will gonna happen little late. Like basically, is this thing, Industrial Revolution actually happened at the 18th century. Okay, yeah. But if the Black Death doesn't really happen, like if the Black Death very less people actually die, so probably that Industrial Revolution may be started in 2000 era. Like basically maybe kind of like somebody in 2020, okay, or in 20th century. Okay, so might be we are kind of like at the time I'm kind of like somebody living the life as a 200 year ago, the way that people who are actually living, we are kind of like living this life today maybe, if the Black Death not happened. So basically is this thing, if the Black Death is not happened, everything became delay and things like that. And but still I am not exactly correct, okay, yeah, because as I mentioned, the future is not rely on only one incident. It kind of like involve lot of factors actually involved too. Okay, like basically I shouldn't supposed to say that Black Death is the only responsible for kind of like somebody the innovations and things like that. There are so many factors actually involved for innovations and stuff like that. Black Death is kind of like one of that reason, but still there are so many factors are responsible too, and all the factors leads to kind of like lead to this world and stuff like that. Right. So this is what happened if the Black Death was not happened or very less happened, things like that. I don't know. I'm just proud of myself for kind of like giving this information. I still didn't really know that I knew like basically I watched kind of like a video about Dhruv Rathi regarding about Black Death. Probably Dhruv Rathi or something else. I'm kind of like watched that video and I'm just kind of like I watched that video maybe like probably a couple of months ago. Yeah. And I'm still kind of like understand. I still knew that stuff. I don't know. I'm just kind of like proud of myself that I still know. I love my brain. I'm kind of like I just like basically this thing when I'm in the zone, when I kind of like heard the answer, legitly I'm kind of like telling this, telling that, and I'm just like, where is this information came from? Oh my word! Alright, okay. I should supposed to end here. This is it, and thank you.